Did you know that loneliness peaks during the holiday season, affecting nearly 61% of adults who report feeling isolated despite being surrounded by others? But sometimes, it takes losing everything to gain what truly matters. This is the story of a man who had the world and nothing at all, until two strangers walked into his life on Christmas Eve and changed everything. The crystal chandelier cast fragmented light across Victor Ashford's face as he sat motionless in his penthouse, surrounded by $43 million worth of art that had never made him feel anything. Outside, Manhattan glittered like a jewelry box, but inside, the silence was suffocating. Christmas Eve, the loneliest night of the year. He'd dismissed his staff hours ago, the chef, the housekeepers, even Margaret, his assistant of 20 years, who'd looked at him with such pity that he couldn't bear it. "Enjoy your family," he told her, his voice hollow. She'd hesitated at the door, wanting to say something. But what could she say? That money couldn't buy what he'd thrown away? Victor lifted his glass of scotch, $50,000 a bottle, aged longer than some marriages lasted, longer than his had, certainly. The amber liquid caught the light, beautiful and meaningless. He thought about Caroline, wondered what she was doing tonight. Did she think of him? Did she hate him? Or worse, did she feel nothing at all? The untouched dinner before him, seared duck breast with cherry reduction, prepared by a Michelin-starred chef before he'd left, had gone cold. Victor couldn't remember the last time he'd actually tasted his food. When had everything become just expensive? Then it happened. The fire alarm exploded through the silence like a scream, shattering his carefully maintained composure. Red light strobed through the darkness. Victor's heart hammered, not from fear, but from something else. A break in the monotony. Proof he was still alive enough to feel startled. He grabbed his coat, cashmere, custom-tailored, warm but somehow never warm enough, and headed for the private elevator. In the lobby, chaos hummed with a strange electricity. Residents in designer pajamas and borrowed coats clustered together, annoyed but together. Victor stood apart as always. Then he saw them. A man in a janitor's uniform, probably early 30s, with kind eyes and worried creases around his mouth. And beside him, a little girl no more than 7, clutching a teddy bear that had seen better days. Her coat was too small, her sleeves ending inches above her wrists. She was shivering. Their eyes met across the marble lobby, this child and this billionaire. And something impossible happened. She smiled at him. Not the calculating smiles he was used to, the ones that saw dollar signs. A real smile, gap-toothed and genuine. Then she walked right up to him, tilting her head like a curious bird. Her father reached for her, embarrassed. "Sophia, don't bother the man." But she was already speaking. "Why are you so sad on Christmas?" The question hit Victor like a physical blow. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. When was the last time someone had actually seen him? Not Victor Ashford, tech billionaire, but him, the man underneath. He started, but the fire chief's voice boomed across the lobby. "Buildings got to stay evacuated, folks. Electrical issue. It could be hours. Might want to find somewhere warm to wait it out." The crowd groaned, began dispersing. The father, Daniel, Victor would later learn, put his hand on Sophia's shoulder. "Come on, mija. We'll wait in the subway station where it's warm." Outside, snow had begun to fall, thick and fast. Victor watched them head toward the door, this man and his daughter, walking into a storm with nothing but each other. And suddenly, inexplicably, terrifyingly, Victor Ashford didn't want to be alone anymore. Wait, he heard himself say, his voice rough from disuse. Please wait. Before we continue, I'd love to know, where are you watching from tonight? Drop your city or country in the comments. Are you somewhere warm or cold? Alone or with family? Your story matters too. What happened next would change everything. But first, Victor had to do something he hadn't done in 15 years. Ask for something money couldn't buy. The hotel suite felt like neutral ground, expensive but impersonal. Somewhere between Victor's fortress and Daniel's reality. Sophia sat at the restaurant table, her legs swinging, not quite reaching the floor, eyes wide at the menu that didn't list prices. "Can I have hot chocolate?" she whispered to her father, as if afraid of the answer. "Of course," Victor said too quickly, desperately. "Anything you want, everything." He stopped himself, hearing how he sounded, trying to buy comfort, old habits. Daniel's eyes flickered with something, not judgment, but understanding, which somehow felt worse. "Hot chocolate sounds perfect, Mija. Thank you, Mr. Ashford." "Victor," he insisted. "Please, just Victor." As Sophia sipped her cocoa, leaving a chocolate mustache that made her giggle. She pulled out crayons from her backpack, the cheap kind from the dollar store, half of them broken. She began to draw with fierce concentration, and Victor found himself watching, mesmerized by her complete absorption. "Your building is very fancy," she said, not looking up from her paper. "We clean it every night. Papa says the people who live there must be very happy." Victor's throat constricted. Do you think they are?" Now she looked up, those dark eyes seeing straight through him again. "I don't know. Are you?" Daniel shifted uncomfortably. "Sophia, that's not." "No," Victor interrupted, his voice cracking. "No, she should ask. She's the only one brave enough to." The words started spilling out then, a dam breaking after years of pressure. He told them about the company he'd built from nothing, the innovation, the success. How he'd convinced himself that sacrifice was noble, that missing birthdays and anniversaries and recitals was the price of greatness. "My daughter, Caroline," he said, staring at his untouched coffee. "Graduated from college 15 years ago. Top of her class. I had a board meeting in Tokyo. I told myself I needed to make it up to her. I always told myself that." Sophia had stopped drawing. Daniel leaned forward slightly, listening with the kind of attention that felt like being truly heard. She wanted to be a teacher. I told her Victor's hands tremble. I told her she was wasting her potential, that teaching was for people without options. She looked at me with such disappointment and said, "You're the one wasting your potential, Dad. You have all the money in the world, and you've never learned what matters." "When did you last speak?" Daniel asked gently. 8 years, 3 months, 12 days ago. The precision of it, the way he'd counted every single one, hung in the air. Daniel was quiet for a moment. Then, "My wife, Maria, died 2 years ago. Cancer. We had 6 months from diagnosis to..." He paused, gathering himself. Sophia reached for his hand. 6 months. We'd been trying to save for a house, working extra shifts. After she died, I found a letter she'd written me. Want to know what it said?" Victor nodded, unable to speak. It said, "I'm not sorry we never got the house. I'm not sorry we drove that terrible car or ate beans and rice most nights. I'm sorry I wasted any minutes worrying about those things instead of just being with you." Daniel's eyes glistened. "We had nothing, Victor, and we had everything." The contrast was brutal. Victor, who'd gained the world, Daniel, who'd lost his world. Yet somehow, Daniel radiated something Victor had forgotten existed. Peace, Not happiness, not with that wound still fresh, but peace, contentment in the love that remained. Sophia pushed her drawing across the table. 3 figures. Her father, tall and strong, labeled Papa my hero, herself holding the teddy bear. And in the middle, Victor, but different, was smiling. She'd drawn sunbeams around his head. "You look happier," she said simply. Victor's vision blurred. When was the last time he'd cried? He couldn't remember. Couldn't remember the last time he'd felt enough to cry. His phone buzzed. Daniel glanced at his own phone simultaneously, and Victor watched the color drain from the younger man's face. "No," Daniel whispered. "No, no, no." "What is it?" Victor asked, alarm spiking through him. Daniel's hands shook as he showed Victor the screen. A news alert. Bronx apartment fire displaces dozens on Christmas Eve. Their building, their home. Sophia, reading her father's expression, began to cry. Papa, what about Mama's necklace?" "What happens next will change everything. But first, Victor must make a choice. The same choice he's been running from for 15 years. Will he retreat into his comfortable isolation? Or will he finally, terrifyingly, step into the messiness of real human connection? The answer would cost him everything, and give him everything back. The taxi ride to the Bronx felt like traveling to a different world, and in many ways, it was. Victor pressed against the window, watching his Manhattan fade into streets he'd never visited, despite living in the city for 40 years. Streets where people actually lived, not just existed between deals. Daniel sat rigid, Sophia crying softly against his chest. "Everything," he kept whispering. "Everything we had left of her." When they arrived, the building was a smoking skeleton. Firefighters still spraying water that turned to ice on the frozen ground. Families huddled on the sidewalk with nothing but their nightclothes and each other, their breath creating small clouds in the freezing air. Victor saw a woman holding twin babies, both screaming. An elderly man in slippers, staring at the ruins with vacant eyes. This was a real loss, not the abstract loss of business deals or stock points. Real people with real lives, gone in minutes. Sophia broke free from her father and ran toward the building. "Mama's necklace. Papa, we have to get Mama's necklace." Daniel caught her, held her as she sobbed. "It's gone, mija. It's gone." Victor stood frozen, watching this man who had nothing lose what little remained. Yet still his first instinct was to comfort his daughter. Daniel wasn't thinking about where they'd sleep or what they'd wear tomorrow. He was holding his child, absorbing her pain, showing her that love remained even when everything else burned. Around them, other families were doing the same. Sharing coats, sharing tears, sharing the impossible burden of starting over. Together. Victor had billions. He could rebuild this building 10 times over. He could give each family enough money that they'd never worry again. But standing there, watching Daniel rock his daughter while his own tears fell silently, Victor suddenly understood what Caroline had tried to tell him 8 years ago. Money wasn't the solution. He was. His hands trembled as he pulled out his phone. The screen glowed in the darkness, showing Caroline's contact, unchanged, still favorited after all these years. His finger hovered over her name. It was past midnight on Christmas. She might not answer. She might hang up. She might 8 years. 3,000 days of pride and fear and regret. He pressed call. 1 ring. His heart hammered so hard he thought it might break through his ribs. 2 rings. What would he say? How do you compress 8 years of sorrow into words? 3 rings. Maybe this was a mistake. Maybe some things were broken beyond repair. "Deek, Dad? Her voice. God, her voice. Sleepy, shocked, tentative. But she'd answered. She'd called him Dad. Caroline, he choked out. Around him, the world continued. Sirens, crying, chaos. But all Victor could hear was his daughter breathing on the other end of the line. Caroline, It's Christmas, she whispered. You called on Christmas. I'm sorry. The words erupted. From somewhere deep. Somewhere he'd kept locked for years. I'm so sorry. For everything. For missing your graduation, for the things I said, for choosing everything else over you, for wasting 15 years being your father when I could have been your dad. His voice broke completely. He was crying in the middle of a sidewalk in the Bronx, surrounded by strangers, everything he'd built to protect himself crumbling like ash. I've had everything, he gasped. Everything money can buy. And I've had nothing. I've been so alone, Caroline. So alone. And tonight I met this little girl who asked me why I was sad. And I didn't have an answer. And then her father, he lost his wife. He lost his home. He has nothing, but he has everything because he has love. And I. He couldn't breathe, couldn't speak, couldn't do anything but stand there, breaking apart. Dad. Caroline's voice was crying too now. Dad, where are you? I don't know, he admitted. I don't know where I've been for 15 years, but I want to come home. Can I come home? Can you forgive me? I know I don't deserve it. I know I wasted it all, but I've been waiting, she sobbed. God, Dad, I've been waiting so long for you to call. Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas, Dad. Sophia had stopped crying, was watching Victor with those wise, ancient eyes. Daniel stood beside him now, a hand on Victor's shoulder. This man who had every reason to be consumed by his own tragedy, offering comfort to a billionaire falling apart. I need you to come somewhere, Victor said to Caroline, his voice strengthening. I need you to meet someone, some people. I need your help. There are families here who lost everything, and I can write checks, but that's not enough. It's never been enough. You work with that nonprofit, you know what people actually need. Caroline, I want to do something that matters. Will you help me? Through the phone, he heard her moving, getting dressed. Text me the address. I'm coming now. As Victor lowered the phone, Sophia reached up and took his hand, her small fingers wrapped around his, trusting and certain. You're not sad anymore, she said. Victor looked at her, at Daniel, at the families around him picking up pieces and holding each other, at the ruins of a building and the indestructibility of human connection. No, he said, squeezing her hand. I'm not sad anymore. What happens when Caroline arrives? How will this single night transform not just Victor's life, but the lives of everyone in this story? The next part will show you that redemption isn't a moment. It's a choice we make every day after. But first, Victor had to learn that the greatest gift he could give wasn't his money. It was himself. Caroline arrived within an hour, her car skidding slightly on the icy streets. Victor watched her emerge, 35 years old, beautiful, capable. A stranger he'd created, but never truly known. Their eyes met across the emergency vehicles and displaced families. And, for a heartbeat, neither moved. Then she ran to him. The hug was awkward at first, bodies remembering hurt before remembering love. But then Victor's arms tightened, and he felt her sob against his chest, and 15 years of walls crumbled into dust. I'm here, he whispered into her hair. I'm finally here. When they pulled apart, Caroline's eyes were red, but clearer than he'd seen them in years. She looked at the scene around them, the families, the smoking building, the impossible task of rebuilding lives, and something shifted in her expression. This was her world. This was what she'd chosen over his empire. "Okay," she said, "all business now. First, we need immediate shelter, then clothing, toiletries, and food." "But Dad," she gripped his arm, "we don't just throw money at this. These people need dignity, not charity. Do you understand?" Victor nodded and meant it. "Teach me." Together, they worked through the night. Victor made calls, but for the first time in his life, he stayed after the calls were made. He carried babies while mothers filled out emergency housing forms. He sat with the elderly man in slippers, listening to stories about a wife lost years ago, children scattered across states. He bought coffee for firefighters and learned their names. Daniel worked beside him, coordinating with Caroline's nonprofit contacts. Victor watched them, his daughter and this janitor-turned-crisis manager, speaking the same language of service and compassion, a language Victor was only beginning to learn. As dawn broke on Christmas morning, Sophia tugged Victor's sleeve. "Mr. Victor, are you still sad?" He knelt to her level, this child who'd cracked him open with a simple question. "No, sweetheart. I'm tired and worried about all these families. But I'm not sad. Do you know why?" She shook her head, teddy bear clutched tight. "Because I'm not alone anymore." The words hung in the cold air, true and terrifying and wonderful. That afternoon, after ensuring every family had temporary housing, Victor made Daniel an offer. Not charity, partnership. "I want to start a foundation for working families, emergency support, education, and housing. But I don't want to run it from some boardroom. I want someone who knows what these families need, someone who's lived it." Daniel stared at him. "Victor, I'm a janitor." "No," Victor said firmly. "You're a father who kept his daughter safe and happy while working 3 jobs. You're a man who lost everything and still had the grace to comfort a stranger. You're exactly who I need. What we all need." Caroline stepped forward. "My nonprofit could partner with your foundation. We could do real good, Dad. Systemic change, not just Band-Aids." Victor looked at his daughter, really looked at her, and saw not wasted potential, but purpose realized. "You were never wasting anything," he said softly. "I was just too blind to see what you'd found." The foundation launched that spring. But more than that, Victor's penthouse, that sterile monument to isolation, began to fill with life. Sunday dinners with Caroline and her family. Sophia's artwork on the walls. Daniel is stopping by to discuss cases, staying for coffee, and becoming the friend Victor never knew he needed. But this isn't just about one Christmas Eve. It's about what happened next, how one night transformed into a lifetime. The final chapter will show you that redemption isn't a moment. It's a choice we remake every single day. Would Victor's transformation last? Or would old patterns pull him back into isolation? The answer might surprise you. 1 year later, Christmas Eve arrived again. Victor stood at his penthouse window, but this time the view looked different. Not because the city had changed, but because he was seeing it through new eyes. Eyes that noticed the janitor working the late shift across the street, the single mother hurrying home with presents, the countless stories unfolding in the lights below. Behind him, his penthouse hummed with noise. Real noise. Living noise. Sophia's laughter echoed from the kitchen, where she was helping Caroline frost cookies, a recipe from Maria's old cookbook that Daniel had finally felt strong enough to share. Caroline's husband, James, a high school history teacher Victor had initially judged and now deeply respected, was showing Victor's two grandchildren, Emma, 4, and Lucas, 6, how to build a gingerbread house. Daniel stood by the fireplace, hanging ornaments and telling stories about Maria that made everyone laugh and cry simultaneously. The walls that once held only expensive art now displayed Sophia's drawings, wild, colorful, full of life. That first drawing, of Victor smiling, held the place of honor above the mantel. Beside it hung the photo from Caroline's wedding last spring, where Victor had walked her down the aisle, tears streaming freely down his face, no longer ashamed to feel. "Papa, look!" Sophia called out, holding up something that made Daniel's breath catch. Maria's necklace. Victor had hired investigators, offered rewards, and searched through ash and debris for months. They'd found it last week, tarnished but intact, a small miracle wrapped in silver. "For you, mija," Daniel said, his voice thick. "Your mama wanted you to have it when you were older. I think you're ready now." As he clasped it around Sophia's neck, Victor felt Caroline's hand slip into his. "Thank you," she whispered, "for coming back to us." "Thank you for waiting," he replied, "for not giving up on me." The foundation had helped 3 on 47 families in its first year. But the numbers weren't what kept Victor up at night anymore. It was the faces. The single mother who'd gone back to school, the veteran who'd found housing, the kids who now had winter coats that fit. Each one is a story. Each one matters. His company still ran successfully, but now it had a purpose beyond profit. Employee assistance programs, living wages, and family leave policies. His board had resisted. "It'll hurt the bottom line," they'd warned. Victor's response: "Then we'll get a better bottom line, one that measures lives, not just margins." Sophia approached him now, holding a new drawing. "I made this for you, Mr. Victor, for your desk at work." It showed a heart, simple, childish, perfect. Inside, she'd drawn stick figures holding hands. He counted them: Daniel, Sophia, Caroline, James, Emma, Lucas, and in the center, tall but no longer alone, was Victor. "So you remember," Sophia said seriously, "that you're not sad anymore." Victor knelt, pulled her into a hug that felt like breathing after years of holding his breath. "I could never forget, sweetheart. You saved my life." "No," she said with that wisdom that always startled him. "You saved your own life. I just asked the right question." As midnight approached, they gathered on the balcony despite the cold. The city sprawled before them, millions of lights, millions of stories. Victor's phone buzzed. A text from Margaret, his assistant. "Merry Christmas, Victor. I'm proud of you." He typed back, "Thank you for never giving up on me either." Caroline raised her glass of cider. "To family. Not the one we're born with, but the one we choose." "To second chances," Daniel added. "To people who ask hard questions," Victor said, winking at Sophia. As they clinked glasses, Victor felt something he'd forgotten existed: contentment. Not the brief high of closing a deal or the hollow satisfaction of accumulating more. Real contentment. The kind that comes from being exactly where you're meant to be, with people who see you, really see you, and love you anyway. The old Victor would have dismissed this as sentimental. The old Victor would have checked his phone, made excuses, and retreated to his office. The old Victor died on a Christmas Eve when a 7-year-old girl asked him why he was sad. The new Victor, the real Victor, was finally, beautifully, alive. Loneliness isn't about being alone. It's about being disconnected from what matters. Victor had everything money could buy, but he'd purchased it with the currency that truly counts: time, presence, love. We can spend our entire lives climbing ladders only to discover they're leaning against the wrong walls. But here's the beautiful truth. It's never too late to ask yourself Sophia's question. Why are you sad? And more importantly, what are you going to do about it? The greatest tragedy isn't failing. It's succeeding at things that don't matter. Victor learned that connection, messy, uncomfortable, real human connection, is the only wealth that compounds forever. Sometimes we need to lose everything to realize what we already had. Sometimes we need a child's honest question to crack open our carefully constructed walls. And sometimes, the people who save us are the ones we least expect. If this story touched your heart, don't keep it to yourself. Hit that subscribe button and join the Heartvault Stories family, because everyone deserves stories that remind us what truly matters. Drop a comment below. Have you ever felt lonely despite being surrounded by success? What's your Sophia moment? The question or person that changed your perspective? Share your story. Your words might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. And if you know someone who needs this reminder that it's never too late to come home to what matters, share this video with them. Because the best gifts aren't wrapped in boxes, they're wrapped in truth. New heartwarming stories every week. Subscribe to Heartvault Stories and never miss a reminder that love, connection, and second chances are always possible. Until next time, remember, the richest life isn't measured in what you own, but in who shows up when you need them most. Merry Christmas and welcome home.